Hey traders, this is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your market recap for Wednesday, the 24th. And obviously, a big washout day that happened. I'm going to go through a couple things. I don't know why, but I'm going to start with the VIX because I think there's a lot of things going on, right? I mean, I think clearly when we have a day like this, SPY finished down 3%, the Qs finished down 4.6%, IWM down 3.7%. Sometimes I think you hear on TV, you know, on the financial networks they talk about the why, why is this happening, what's going on, and then how much further to the downside. So I will give my opinion on both of those, and kind of tell you what I'm doing, and that's basically, what I do every day is give you a sense of what I'm doing and what I see, and use a little bit of my experience. Again, all these videos are obviously for information purposes only. I could tell you from my experience, right? So I started when I started my professional career, which was basically in 1998. I did an internship and ended up landing at Dean Witter. It was before it was bought by Morgan Stanley. So I've traded through a few different financial crises or meltdowns. I don't know how financial crisis, if you want to phrase it that way, but I traded through the 2000 2001 bubble. Then I went back to graduate school and because I wanted to get into institutional trading. So I did that and traded through all through the financial crisis, which was just a huge. Every day was something different was going on in terms of panic and in terms of bear markets, and very difficult and huge amount of volume every day to get through and to trade. And then everywhere between since then, a couple different things. So people we're getting a lot of earnings reports out. I'm going to go through the ones that came out through tonight, that came out after the close tonight. But one of the things that I always remember is that stock prices are a leading indicator. And what I mean is, just like when I was in graduate school, I remember sitting in an economics class. I had a great economics professor, and at that time, I think it was, and I need to double check this, but I think it was around 2003 ish. Uh, the market was our unemployment, the U.S. unemployment rate was pretty low. The economics were continuing to go up. Everything was very strong, but the stock market was selling off, and that will happen. So you're never going to get, well, not, I don't want to say never, because there are some events like Bear Stearns going out of business, and things really accelerating. There was some warning signals there, and a lot of, obviously that's a whole nother situation. But when we have situations like we're having right now, there's not going to be anything that really. Sometimes companies come out with earnings, they're fine, but the market is selling off. The market knows something that we don't. So we can't really come up with a reason other than the market is pricing in something maybe that we're not completely aware of. Uh, and I respect for the technicals. I've learned through the financial crisis and some other breakdowns that we've seen is just respect your support levels. And then you can revisit once volatility starts to come back in. But you're not always going to have the reasons. And sometimes, even if you get the reasoning about what's going on, it's too late. So let me start going through some of the technicals and talk about today's price action. But I wanted to take a step back and just to kind of show you, kind of tell you what I've been doing, which I really haven't been trading that much, and I've been saying this for the last week. In the weekend note that I issue, I put out a weekend note just about every weekend, and I just said caution. We've got too many things that look like they're breaking down, and too many warning signals. So. I haven't really been shorting too much. I was actually out of the office today. Otherwise, I probably would have bought some different index puts, because I've been doing that from day to day when I think there's some downside. But I was out of the office midday. I had a Bloomberg interview, which unfortunately got put back. I think they'll have the recording for it, but because of all the stuff that was going on in Midtown New York, we were getting the press briefing then. So just bad timing in two different spots for me today, because being out of the office and away from the screens did not help. But couple things, right? So on today's price action, basically everything that if you've got some feelers out in some things, I view the semiconductors as they are very telling. They were down 6.7%. I talked about how biotech XBI is one of the things that I look at, upside and downside. Yesterday it gave a nice signal for a bounce. It did not take anything. It did not regain any important technical levels. And this thing, Phil, this thing is down 7.4%. So if you look at this, as I'm going through some of these, and of course IWM as well, which also had another atrocious day. These are things that you want to see. You want to see buyers in, and you want to see they will often rebound first. XBI, I talked about this level. The week is not over, but breaking in, we held support in a few different things that I was watching yesterday. The builders, the regional banks, and biotech, all starting with a B. They held support yesterday, but they did not today. These are all in the weekly charts, so we'll see if how this shapes up for the remaining of the week. I think that necessarily I don't want to try to call a bottom here. I don't think we're as oversold as we need to be. I think some things like the put call ratio were over 1% today, or over over 1 today. So that the panic really has to set in, and I don't think it's there yet. I was looking at the ETF volumes, which we saw this 2 weeks ago. The last time that we really kind of felt like it was a little bit of maybe a baby capitulation. We'll go to the S&P now. So the S&P, here was basically where we put in where we got oversold, right? If I could scroll over here a little bit. Oops, I just lost it. Right, we got this big bounce day. We got very oversold on the RSI. It was about an 17, 18. They had the markets, the CNBC special on. The fear and greed was down to like a 5, I think. But the RSIs were really, really oversold, and it was worthy of a balance. So we got that, and of course that got faded. You know what happened there. But we're not that oversold yet. Even though we've gone down very fast, the RSI is in oversold territory. It's just not as oversold as it was a couple weeks ago. And if you look across the charts, you're going to see the same thing. So if you look at Nasdaq, which had a bigger downside day, are we at extreme oversold levels? Unfortunately, no. Here's where the RSI was when we had the bounce. A couple weeks ago, we were what, around? Sorry, it's not. I'll zoom in here. But there was a couple things that were pointing to majorly oversold, and that's what the RSI is good for kind of gauging a bounce day, not a trend change, just a possible bounce day. So I don't know. Maybe the CNBC Markets in Turmoil special will help, but. Same thing. I was looking, before we kind of took that last leg lower, I was looking at the VIX. We're not even that stressed out. We have not taken out the highs that we saw a couple weeks ago. So this worries me a little bit that we've got more to go to the downside without a bounce necessarily coming. So, I didn't really do much again in terms of adding risk. What did I do today? I put on XLP. So what else? Before I go to these, but yeah, I mean, these are the three things before I talk about the defensives. But those are the things to kind of really keep an eye on: are the semiconductors, the brokers, meaning the banks. They seem to, every time that we have a washout day, the brokers go to the banks. So KRE is a good one to watch, as well as the semiconductors and biotech. They've all been going down. They're all falling together. when we've got a washout day. And also the other thing that you'll find in the beginning of the day as well, when we're kind of like flattish for the day, the defenses will really start to outperform. So I've been calling them the three amigos, the three defensive amigos. I've got to work on this phrase a little bit better. But those three are the consumer staples, which outperformed. They did not close, everything, unfortunately, when we have a washout day will get hit pretty hard normally. But they did not give you a buy signal. So I took two targets in this trade that I put on today in XLP, the consumer staples ETF. I noted that I've been calling this the party ETF because consumer staples are so dull. But big volume in the Fiesta ETF. This is Fidelity Consumer Staples. Sorry for my bad jokes. Big inflow into this. Some of the biggest volume this ETF has ever seen. But to put it in perspective, it's only $40 million. It's not that big, but just this ETF just doesn't trade a lot. XLU, which is the second amigo. This did take out a Virgin point of control. I've been watching this for a while. I did not want to get long into this Virgin point of control. These are places to take profits, not to put trades, in my opinion. Put trades on, I should say. And then REITs. That's the third amigo. And kind of what I favor right now, in terms of those names. So, yeah. Still finished up on the day. These things finished green. And the positive of this stuff, and why you see me out on Twitter, and why I started to go out, put things out on Twitter, last Friday about Walmart and some of the other defensives, is because if you're an options trader, these things are very cheap. So I put a tweet out earlier about the implied volatility difference between, and I just chose the FANG stocks, but you could use any growth names. They're a lot more, they're going to cost you a lot more in premium because of the implied volatility in the growth names versus the defensive names, because the defensive names normally don't move that fast. But if people start to rush into them, they're going to move. So we'll have to see. I don't like that. Obviously, don't like this candle for Walmart. Looked great about 12 o'clock today, but this also succumbed, which generally happens when everything starts to sell off. Even the names that have been holding up. I think this happened to Apple as well, which was faring pretty decently for until about right until the end of the day. Until that dove. All right, so that's just a little bit of my market take. Unfortunately, we're not as oversold as we were. The put call ratio is not as high as I think it needs to get. We are seeing a lot of put buying. But if you look at this, which I think this should be updated now on Bloomberg, we'll talk a little bit about AMD. This is the intraday, which I think is updated. The final one doesn't get updated till the next day. So what does Bloomberg have this at? About 1.15. So it's up there. It's not extreme. The other thing that you note here with this put call ratio, it's just kind of been hanging around. It's not a spike like we saw in January and some other sell. It's just been kind of hanging around here. So same thing with the VIX. It's not extreme. It's not overbought. It's just kind of hanging around, which which doesn't to me does not give me a warm and fuzzy feeling. I'm also not seeing, and this doesn't have to be every single sell-off that we go through this checklist and all these boxes have to be checked. Right? This is not nearly as overbought as it was here, right? Or here. But another box that I like to check off is ETF volume. Now we saw this a couple of weeks ago when we saw that last washout. But look at the SPY volume. This over here. This is when it's 1. That means it's trading based on average volume. So it traded about 80% more than it normally does. So not even 2 times. I want to see these things trade 2 or 3 times as kind of capitulation selling. we saw that, like I said, if you look at, for example, which one do I want to go to? I could look at any one of these sector ETFs, but look at the volume on this day here, right? Here is the volume. Look at the volume today. Even though there is a virgin point of control taken out, and this one's actually more oversold. So I did find something that was more oversold. What is the RSI here? A 20. So some things are getting pretty oversold. Keep in mind, I think most of the industrials have reported earnings now, so maybe they're full on washout. And maybe it'll go sector by sector, right? We've got so let me go over a couple of names for earnings, which again, there's so much to cover, right? I could be talking for basically an hour and a half, which I'm not going to do that for the video, but Microsoft's almost down to the 200-day moving average. They had great numbers, and just barely back to where we were at 2 o'clock today. Visa had decent numbers. I don't think great, but good numbers. Tesla seems like it's the big winner. Amazing Tesla. And then a couple other names that are on my list. F5 is moving up here a bit. Now reported they're moving up. Xilinx reported. I saw them up earlier. So you do have some names that are, above yesterday. It's already almost yesterday already. It's already above the open, which I think is good. Xilinx went right up to that version point of control. On the flip side, AMD smoked, and I'm not going to cover every single one, but this is a surprise one. Whirlpool, Orly. I made a mistake today and did not trade this one. This was something that I put in in our Slack chat room. Coiling going into earnings. Maybe this takes coiling sets up for big moves, but you could see how this was really coiled, and an automotive name, an auto part name. So, a group that has just been beaten up, and Orly's been hanging in there. So that just was a matter of time to me. Another one that got beaten up was Align, another heavy growth name. Especially in these growth names, respecting support or putting in maybe a little bit less money than normal. But that's a pretty decent washout in Align Technology. So that's where I stand for today. I'm positioned in a little bit of the defensives, but other than that, I'm going to sit on my hands. I'm not going to deploy a lot of money yet until we get a little bit better signals. And I'm not really, even though the CNBC special's on tonight, which I was super excited a couple weeks ago when that came on, because everything was kind of lining up for a bounce. I don't know if things are oversold enough based on those daily RSIs. If we bounce tomorrow, great. Maybe that'll give you an opportunity to sell some things. You want to make sure, I always want to make sure that I'm selling and while the trend is down right now. If we do get that bounce, if we get a little bit of green tomorrow, I would look for sellers to come back in. All right, guys, that is it for today's recap. Thanks for watching and have a great night.